All right, here we go. We are live, and today we're going inside Momofuku's creator program with a very strategic creator marketer behind it, Gillian Smith. She runs creator partnerships over at Momofuku, and we're going to talk about how she sources creators, how she builds real relationships, measures what's working, and a lot of stuff that does not make it into these days AI generated LinkedIn posts. But before we jump in, I want to talk about why we do these series. We wanted at Archive, we wanted to create a space for creator marketers to hear from other peers in the industry how they're approaching the challenges that come up basically every other week in our industry. Things across different verticals, different brands. The best ideas oftentimes come from other people in the space. And this series is all about sharing learnings from the best people. All right. Quick intro on myself before we jump into Gillian and Momofuku. I'm Paul, the CEO of Archive. We're a creator marketing platform that helps brands automate the manual side of creator programs, things like social listening, capturing content, discovering new creators. We work with thousands of brands ranging from L'Oreal to DoorDash to fast-growing beauty brands and many more. And we're super excited about specifically talking today around how Gillian uses Archive in her workflows, but she's got a ton of other value to add today. All right, so here we go to kick off with the important stuff. Welcome, Gillian. I'll introduce you and then you can jump in and say hello. But Jillian's been a long-time customer and someone that we as a product company have learned so much about how the best influencer marketers operate. She's Gillian Smith and runs the creator program at Momofuku. We all know Momofuku. They've got one of the most exciting they're one of the most exciting CPG brands in the country, and Gillian has been running the creator shop over there. She's also got experience on the agency side, so those two angles are very important, and has been scaling the program very well. Cool. Gillian, welcome. Really excited to kick things off.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here and chat a little bit about my experience.
Awesome. So let's start by giving people a little bit of context. Can you walk through your role today at Momofuku and what the creator program looks like?
Yes, so I am the influencer and content manager here at Momofuku Goods. We have a pretty traditional influencer program, which includes pay-to-play partnerships. We do a seeding and gifting program. And then a lot of our support also goes cross-functionally for organic social, paid ads, retail moments, and then events and activations as well.
Awesome. Um, and where do you see that going over the next 12 months? What part of the program are you really focused on building and growing these days?
Yeah, so I joined the team back in November and we've already, kind of had this really efficient funnel of partnerships for, the past couple of years. And I'm really looking forward to, especially in the second half of 2026, continuing to build relationships. Something that we've talked about in-house is, how can we build a strong roster of talent that we can bring into 2027 and just kind of have this repeatable funnel of content and collaborations and really push the needle too. So, we're talking more about doing IRL events. We've had the opportunity to do a couple this year, but we really want to tap into those like real moments with our partners next year. So, really excited. We have a lot coming down the pipeline that I'm really, really looking forward to.
I feel like IRL events are coming back even harder
Yeah,
than after COVID. Like everyone's
yeah,
talking
totally.
about them.
Yeah.
What are your why?
Gosh, we can get into this in so many ways, but I think one of the challenges with this industry, anyone who on the call is also in influencer marketing will understand this. A lot of what we do is behind the scenes, right? Like I'm emailing people, I'm DMing people. On the, ideal occasion, we're able to jump on a Zoom call, but so much happens through a screen. And what's really special, I think, about the industry is if you're able to tap into those personal relationships and kind of really build out um, a friendship with an influencer or with an agent, that really does go a long way. And so I think having something like a coffee chat or, you're doing an event local to wherever you live with local influencers, I really think that can help build more rapport with your partners and then just turn into even stronger, collaborations in the future.
Yeah, we've been hearing that a lot. I was talking to the CEO of Verse, and they're actually investing in having coffee with as many of their influencers as possible to really try to build and nurture that relationship. So moving far off the transactional side of things. Cool. Before we
Yeah.
talk about what everybody gets wrong, given that you've got such great perspective working on the agency side and across different brands, can you talk a little bit about how you see influencer marketing as a whole and how maybe it niches specifically with regards to a CPG company like Momofuku? Help kind of contextualize the flavor that you're running at Momofuku.
Yeah, so I mean, I think my background is unique just in the sense that I do have both the agency and brand side, opportunities. I think right now, obviously, you mentioned I'm working in food and we have a lot of really strong partnerships with foodies, but I do think that, creator categories, can be very like sneaky. They can be really, enticing for brands no matter what your product is. So obviously, here we're marketing noodles, we're marketing Chili Crunch, our fan favorite Chili Crunch, and foodies are kind of the category that I think a lot of people assume works for us, but there's so many different subsets of creators that are really strong for us. So camping is a really great avenue that performs for us, and that's just something that we want to kind of tap into more. Parents, we want to get a meal on the table within 10 minutes and get everyone to bed. So I think that's a really special piece about our program. And then I think second to that too is something we've talked about offline, preparation for this is, you don't really need a huge budget to have a meaningful program. I think a lot of brands assume that, they need to work with these like mega tier creators and pay them hundreds of thousands of dollars. And something that I've learned throughout my career, again, having both the agency and brand experience is, you can have a very small budget and still create these really meaningful relationships, really impactful partnerships, and really like push brand awareness for your program.
I feel like that's the blessing and the curse of influencer marketing. You can get a
Totally.
lot done with just human capital and work, but it's also so hard to scale
Yep.
because the human capital part is really important. Cool. We'll flip over to the next slide to talk a little bit about what people are getting wrong these days. I feel like every other post on LinkedIn tells me that influencer marketing is dead and doesn't work anymore. What are the facts here, Jillian? What's your take?
Yes. I see a lot of mixed messages on LinkedIn. Again, anyone on this call who's in this industry will be able to understand that. I see posts saying influencer marketing is dead or dying. And then I'm seeing, other brands saying it's the new unlock for, our brand. And, I really love this industry. I think every time people claim that it's dying, I actually think it grows even more. To the brands who feel like influencer marketing isn't working, my question is like, are you still testing new things, right? I think one of the things I learned early on in my career is that you have to be adaptable. You have to be able to try new things. And, we're essentially in this industry to test and learn and sometimes test and fail. So, the industry is evolving and we have to be able to do that alongside it. And I think the second point too that I see often is a lot of brands focus on follower count first. That's something that I personally, prefer to kind of ignore. I think that there's some really, really strong creators that, maybe have 5,000 followers, but they're creating high quality assets. They have an incredibly engaged audience. And I think those are avenues that are, really, really important for a program to view. And I think that the other thing too is when brands are saying that influencer marketing isn't working, I just kind of want to ask like, well, what have you tried, right? Some brands see a lot of success with traditional pay to play flat fee partnerships, but there's also affiliate marketing. There's a really great opportunity to do some sort of commission based collaboration where a creator, posts and then they're receiving commission instead of a flat fee, or maybe you're working with creators on a UGC perspective for paid ads and, maybe whitelisting the contest or something like that. But there's so many different ways you can take influencer partnerships that I really I can't get behind the messaging that it's a failing, it's going to fail or it's going to die one day. I just think it's evolving and you kind of have to stay on top of that in order to keep evolving with it.
And what are some, speaking of these learnings and, follower count being one of them and whatnot, you've been doing this for so long.
Mhm.
What are some beliefs that you had coming in that you had to unlearn or maybe disprove the hard way? What's some wisdom you can share there for other people in the chat?
Yeah. Yeah, I am really grateful for the mentors that I had at the start of my career. I feel like they really helped set the stage for my understanding of influencer marketing. But with that being said, I definitely have had a couple learnings. The first one I'll speak to is, this idea that the algorithm is always changing, right? Like I kind of wanted this funnel of success. And I wanted to be able to prove out every partnership was, going to drive revenue or drive brand awareness or whatever it was. And that's not the case, right? It's not always going to be that way. And, I think I reflect back on the start of my career and, my first role, YouTube was king. That was everything we were doing. Every partnership was on YouTube. And then it became Instagram and then TikTok. And every single time I've had to completely restructure my strategy just to kind of remain relevant. I love a strategic plan. I love to kind of follow some sort of organized checklist. And I think I've had to learn in this industry that you really have to be adaptable because tomorrow's going to change. We had threads come out and that was, a big deal. And Pinterest is, I feel like having this resurgence and YouTube is coming back again. And you just kind of have to remain adaptable. So that was one of my learnings. And then the second one I spoke to a little bit as well, but you're in this industry to fail. I don't know that people on this call will necessarily like that. But as someone who wants to succeed, I really had to realize that this is about testing and failing and learning. You have to test new verticals, you have to try to find new audiences, and sometimes it's going to hit and sometimes it won't. I have been humbled many times by a partnership that I either thought was going to be successful or maybe I didn't love the content and it was either, out of the park, best collab of the campaign or, the opposite. So it's all a process in building a successful program to find those strong performers for your brand.
Quick question. A couple people are mentioning threads in the audience. Do you see that as an influencer channel? Do you see any value there these days? And are you optimistic for it?
I personally don't. And I'm sorry to anyone in the chat who does.
Yeah.
It's just not something that I've gotten into. I will say I felt the same way when TikTok, kind of came out. This is during the pandemic, obviously, and I was so unsure about it, and I really pushed back. And then obviously, it's a huge successful funnel for us. So right now, I don't think Threads is something that I want to really prioritize in my strategy. Would be curious, obviously, to chat with individuals after who feel differently, but from my end, no.
Yeah, we've got a lot of people in the chat. So throw in your experience with threads. By the way, we'll remove Mark Zuckerberg from the webinar, so he's not he's not judging. But curious to hear if anybody's tested threads from an influencer perspective and what's worked. Drop your feedback in the chat.
Yeah.
What else? Speaking of some of these channels, you mentioned YouTube is having a resurgence.
Yeah, so it's been really interesting for me. We've had some of our partners cross post their content from their reel onto YouTube Short, and we've been able to see really strong views on YouTube. So it's just kind of been like a really fun thing to test. We're not doing integrated posts quite yet, where it's like a dedicated video or anything, but YouTube Short has been really fun for us to tap into more. And then Facebook too. I feel like Facebook has this like video function that there's a huge market for people there. So it's been really interesting. For a couple of years, I feel like Instagram and TikTok were my focus, and now I'm going back to YouTube. I'm testing on Facebook as well, and it's been really fun.
Yes, one of the interesting things around Facebook is that they oftentimes have very long watch time. So people spend a lot of time on Facebook,
Yeah,
and I've heard that that can be similar to YouTube, where you can have these longer videos that can be a good fit for deeper explanations. We have seen a little bit of that on Meta as well, Meta Facebook. Cool. Let's talk about relationships. A lot
yes.
of people think of creator marketing as very transactional. What's the ROI? How to make it more efficient? What does it actually look like from the creator side, and what do you do differently here than a just straight transactional engagement?
Yeah, so I mentioned kind of at the start of this call that, one of the hardest things that I experience in this industry is that so much communication does happen through a screen. And I've worked for a lot of brands that, they start to see success with influencer and then they just say scale, 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 right? Like we want to grow this program, we want to build it out. So I understand obviously that perspective. If you're seeing success, you want to, continue to push it. But the result of that is very one-off transactional feeling partnerships. And that's kind of one of the biggest challenges that I just feel like we have here in this industry. So I constantly am trying to ask myself, how can we make this more meaningful? We all have internal KPIs that we have to hit, right? Like that's something that's incredibly important for our internal program. But we're also interacting with a human being who is introducing us to their community. And, here at Momofuku, we feel so honored that we are able to work with these partners and that they're excited to partner with us and excited to introduce us to their audience and this, community that they've built on their own. So, I'm not getting this right every time. It's still a work in progress. But it's something that I have to constantly remind myself of. And there's a couple ways that I would kind of recommend brands view this or pursue it. So one of the things that I try to do is, if I'm emailing someone and I can't hop on the phone with them, I'll just ask, like, do you have any fun plans for the weekend? And then, sometimes you look at someone's story and maybe they're posting about moving. And maybe in a week or two, you follow up with them and say, hey, restocking your pantry after your move. Or someone announces that they're adopting a dog or they're planning a wedding. Like there are so many life moments that happen in creators' lives. So I constantly am trying to think, how can we show up for people beyond just a partnership? And I think that that's, an area that is always a work in progress, but it's really, really important.
Awesome. Can you share a story maybe of when one of those tactics paid off or led to a win on your team? Thinking about a life
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah. I think this one is it's kind of sad to share, but we had a creator that we were working with for a couple of months, and she unfortunately lost her mother. And it was a very hard time for the creator. She obviously had to push back timelines for her content, which we completely understood. But we were able to kind of be there for her in a way that I would have never expected out of a partnership. So when she reached out to us and said, unfortunately, I've had a loss in the family, I'm going to be offline, taking bereavement. First of all, again, like I said, we completely understood, but we were able to show up and, we didn't just send flowers. We like put together this very intentional box of, like a cozy robe and like a little spa card that was to a spa local to her, and just kind of things that were hopefully giving her a little sense of like TLC almost, obviously like take your time to grieve and just yeah, take your time, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But it was very hard. It was really sad. But we just tried to show up in a way that felt meaningful. And yeah.
And as you grow the team, as you grow the program, how do you make these moments happen on the regular basis? Is this something that is part of the culture? Maybe like hospitality, you look for people, or when you're working with influencers, you've got to be someone that's always looking or caring. Or have you found ways to build systems around this so that you're also able to scale it in a way while still maintaining trust in the human part?
Yeah. In past roles, we have had a really great function of like pre-planned gift boxes that were just automatically in our Shopify. So we maybe had something for moving. Like there's a kit that was available in Shopify. So if we saw a creator in the process of moving, we could just quickly order that and send that to them. But I think it's definitely a practice that you have to continue to work at. It is challenging as you're scaling or you're building out a program or something like that. But I think that there are small ways that you can kind of pursue it in your everyday. You just have to be a little bit more intentional about it.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about picking creators, which is, I don't know what the right analogy is, something around seed investing or the lottery or something, but it is very hard and time consuming. And I would love for you to share your approach to vetting creators and finding the right ones to work with.
Yeah. So I mentioned this at the start of the call too, but I actually don't think about follower count first. I don't think that necessarily tells the whole
Well, not
story.
not by the way, not at all, or you think of it softly.
Softly. Yeah. So
Yeah.
when I'm looking at someone's profile, the first thing that I'm looking at is the quality of the content. their audience engagements, the frequency that they're posting, and then like the verticals and obviously brand safety. And then I'll scroll back up to the top and look at their follower count. So, that might be a little bit different for some brands, which is totally fine. But I have found that there are really strong creators that are, mid-tier or micro. And they produce such high quality content that resonates with what I want to push out as a brand. So obviously there are moments where, you want to work with someone who has 500,000 followers or, whatever it might be. But there are so many creators. I think people would be surprised, if they really dove into this, but there are creators who have 5,000 followers, but they maybe get 50,000 average views on their content. They're new, they're blowing up, and they're kind of building out their own platform. And those are the creators that you kind of want to start relationships with, right? Like they're in the process of building. They're getting really strong engagement already. And if you kind of build that relationship before they have, hundreds of thousands of followers, I think I have found that that can be very meaningful.
And how do you do that systematically? What is you know, so I guess maybe let's go back to the actual programs that you run, right? And the different flavors of influencer marketing. Um,
Mhm.
do you have different types of creators that are going to be better fit for different programs? You talked about a few different things. You talked about people having their own communities. So to me, that implies maybe not necessarily the best content creators, but they're telling stories to an audience and we want to distribute against that audience. You also talked about creating content. We've seen a lot of brands really focus on creators as well, content partners, where we don't really care about the distribution they're going to get because we're going to put a lot of paid behind it, maybe. Are there different flavors of influencers for your different programs, or do you have a little bit of a more holistic or broad approach?
Yeah, I think I always do advocate for a broad approach. I think it's beneficial to work with partners across tiers and across verticals. But with that being said, I think that there are definitely, niches that you can tap into more. So, here at Momofuku, like I had kind of said, like we find foodie creators to be really successful for us, but we've been also able to tap into other, unique areas and kind of find new audiences. Like I mentioned, like camping is one that I feel like has been surprisingly interesting for us. And I think that algorithm works no matter what brand you have, right? So I'm in CPG right now, but if you are a tech company or something, like I just try to think, who would use this product? Right now I'm thinking who cooks? A lot of people cook, right? Like you might be a chef, professional chef, and you're cooking all the time, or you might be a parent and you're cooking for your three children. Or, past roles, I was selling marketing rugs, and who needs a rug? A lot of people need a rug. So I think it's kind of having that outside of the box thinking. And, if you have audience segmentation, that's obviously interesting and great. But there's so much more that you could test into. And I think influencer marketing allows for that.
Awesome. One of the things we've talked about in the past is thinking about creators that have already spoken about brands and
Mhm.
using them to source. Could be competitors. I'd love to get your thoughts about that, but also people that are already talking about Momofuku, for example. How do you think about potentially pulling from those pools of creators to find the right people for the community you're building?
Yeah. So, something that we do here very often is we're looking at creators that are already mentioning us. I think that that is a great avenue for us to really find new potential partners. As I mentioned, we have this seeding program as well. And so we're able to organically get our content in front of potential new partners, understand, how they organically enjoy us, whether they're integrating us into a recipe that they're producing or whatever it might be. And then that can turn into a relationship as well. So, I think no matter, again, what you're marketing, there's a lot of different ways that you can find new creators. One of my favorite is just looking at who's tagging us, who's talking about us. Look at YouTube for reviews, find creators that are already talking about you. If I find a creator who posted about us, I'll look at their comments. Sometimes you find other influencers who are posting saying, "Oh, I love Momofuku," or something like that. So there's definitely a lot of avenues that you can pursue to find creators, organically speaking about you.
Awesome. We had a question that I'll throw in since it's relevant from Jewel. She still would love to learn how you prioritize distribution versus content to run as paid, right? Hey, are we going
Mm.
to spend money on these influencers to hit their audiences for reach, whatever metrics, or on the paid side?
Yeah, that's a great question. We are testing a lot of different avenues right now. So it's been a little bit different campaign to campaign. So, for example, in May, we just ran a campaign where we had the partners post on their profiles. We didn't pre-negotiate any usage rights or anything like that. And then once we saw how the content was organically performing, then we went back and we negotiated usage for some of the content to run on our channels, on Meta, or through whitelisting. There have been other campaigns where I'll kind of maybe split it. So maybe half of the partners, I'm just going to have them do traditional, post on their end. And then other partners, I'm tweaking the brief a little bit. So we're getting content that resonates a little bit more with our paid team. So it's definitely a mix here. I think it's really wonderful to kind of have that flexibility and work with your paid team. In all of my roles, I've had a really close opportunity to work with our paid team. And I think it's really great to be able to just test into, what you need from an organic perspective or what you need to share from a brand awareness perspective. And then also getting content that resonates, in paid ads, because sometimes they can be very similar. Sometimes they can be very different needs.
Yeah. Super easy to measure success on the paid ad side of things, right? Meta
Yeah.
platforms, ads managers,
Yeah.
they tell us exactly what's going on. A little bit harder to measure success when we're working with influencers for distribution. How do you do it? What are your KPIs? How do you know when things are working?
Yeah, definitely. This is a fun one, right? I think this industry is really challenging. Attribution can be very hard. But I think there's a lot of ways that you can evaluate the value of a partnership. So you can look at things like views, likes, comments, shares, saves has been something I've been really looking at, given we do a lot of recipe content. And then, from like a reporting perspective, obviously I'm presenting on CPM, our impressions, and our EMV. But I think, there are creators who maybe have a higher CPM, but they also maybe received, you know, thousands of comments and half of them said something, oh, I just bought this at Whole Foods. So that kind of shows intent to purchase or that retail connection from awareness to revenue, right? So I think there's a lot of different ways that we're considering the success of partnerships. Again, I mentioned we all have internal KPIs that we have to hit, but there are also other things that I'm looking at that might direct me to think, okay, maybe this person isn't great for brand awareness. They didn't really hit the views, but they had really strong audience sentiment. And this is something that I want to pursue again.
What kind of scale are we talking about with the Momofuku Creator Program? How many creators do you work with roughly a month or a year?
So we're working kind of more on a quarterly basis. So we have quarterly campaigns, and we're partnering with just under 100 creators per quarter. So this is actually one of the smaller programs that I have managed in my career, but it's very intentional and it's been really fun to kind of spend more time analyzing, what's working and what's not.
Gotcha. And share some tips around there. What have you seen work best in terms of tracking these creators, in terms of measurement? Are you going directly in the platforms? What does your stack and framework look like?
Yeah, so it's a little bit manual, and then it's a little bit automated. So right now I am pulling things like views, comments, engagements, shares manually. So uh, I like to go and look at the content myself and just, kind of have an internal tracker that I use. And so I'll pop all those metrics into my tracker. And then obviously we are working with Archive right now. And so from that perspective, I'm able to pull EMV and impressions. And then I'm able to build out what that CPM success looks like per creator. So it's a little bit manual, along with platform support. I have had previous roles where it's been completely manual, and then also roles where we've had tools that manage, everything end to end. So pretty wide variety. And I think one of the things I'll, say to anyone on this call is maybe starting out is you can really do a lot on your own. Obviously, it's very manual, but it does help when you have kind of the support of a tool as well.
Awesome. Super helpful. Jewel asked a follow-up question, and the discovery component, is that also manual?
Yes, yeah. So this is such a funny question because I feel like I've tried almost every tool available, and I have never really found one that gets what I am looking for. That could just be a personal thing, but I prefer to search manually. So I have a lot of lists that I build, that are maybe based on location or niche or category or something like that. And those I'm kind of updating all the time. I think, everyone who works in this industry is chronically online. And so I'm saving creators that I really love and I'm adding them to my list, on Monday. I have noticed that Claude, we have the integration that you guys built out. We've added that to our Claude, and I do think that some of the sourcing I've been able to do through that has been efficient the last couple months. But for the most part, I'm doing it manually. I have this funny story where in a past role I was looking for creators in health and wellness, and the output for the platform we were using at the time was bodybuilders. So it just, it's never quite right, but I've just found, I can go down a rabbit hole and find a really strong list of partners on my own.
Awesome. Super helpful. For folks in the room that are not familiar with Archive and the Claude integration, can you share a little bit more about how that works and how that's helped?
Yeah, so we added our whatever you guys built out, and it's been really great for like creator workflows. I've been able to get a lot of support with brief generation. So what I'll do is I'll just kind of pop in some of the things that I'm looking for, and it'll create a really great brief for us. That's been really efficient for us. Reporting too, and I'm sure we'll talk about this a little bit more, but we do our monthly reporting, and it can get pretty granular. And so one of the things that's been really beneficial is, after I compile the views, comments, engagements, things like that, and then I can pull a CSV from Archive that has the impressions and EMV, I can actually just pop that right into Claude and then ask it specific questions, around, hey, can you look at the CPM by vertical? What was the most efficient, or, something like that. So it's definitely helped my workflow. I'm a one woman show here. It's just me on the influencer team. So, any support that I can get has been really beneficial. And that integration with Claude has certainly helped. I think it just made it understand my industry and like my needs more.
Yeah, just the personalization is really helpful. Sigi will share some more info in the chat there, but let's switch over to two slides from that, Sigi. Let's talk about measurement a little bit. You talked
Yep.
about a scorecard in our prep that was a little bit more
Yep.
qualitative, that had qualitative and quantitative criteria. Can you
Yep.
walk us through the different components and how you actually use it and when?
Yes. Yeah. So this kind of goes off of the reporting discussion we talked about before. This scorecard is something that our team had in place when I joined, and I absolutely love the way that it's laid out. So obviously, as you'll see on the screen here, we focus 60% on the quantitative results and then 40% on qualitative. So quantitative is reach, the engagement rate, EMV, CPM, things like that. And then qualitative are, kind of more up to my discretion. So the content quality, brand alignment, adherence to brief, and then audience sentiment. So I think this is easily adaptable to whatever, product or focus you have with your own program. But at the end of any campaign, I'm actually evaluating performance for a partner, and I'm using this scorecard to quantify each individual impact. So then I can kind of take that back to upper leadership. So, for an example here, if a creator received a 10, they maybe were below our CPM target and they adhered to the brief, or, the quality of the content was top notch, so they get a 10. This is just kind of a great way for me to look at both the actual like hard numbers and then also, my personal experience working with them on a human level.
Awesome. You talked about leadership meetings. We all have bosses, and they sometimes help inform the budgets, the priorities.
Mhm.
And not all of them have run influencer programs and know the amount of work that goes into it, the difficulties of measurement. What do those conversations look like? How do you navigate sometimes maybe a little bit of the education side to help people on the leadership side understand what comes into the program? But also, how do you speak their language in terms of the way they think about things? Maybe it's, CAC, numbers, LTV, or
Yeah.
connecting it to the budget. Would love for you to share some advice there.
Yeah. So every brand that I worked for has had a slightly different preference or priority when it comes to what success looks like. But one thing I always will include in a wrap report is a slide that shows just the data at a glance, right? Like we're thinking the TLDR, we're thinking the big picture. I think this will look different, for everyone depending on what is a prioritization for your leadership. But if I'm working for a brand who wants to see revenue, I'm going to put in big letters or big numbers at the top of the slide, what our conversions were for that month. If someone wants to understand audience sentiment, how do followers respond? Maybe I'm putting screen grabs of comments. So it definitely can be, manual, but I think it's super important, as I mentioned at the start of this call too, to pull things like views, likes, saves, and then add in that equation for the CPM. And if you have resources like Archive to look at impressions and EMV, that's obviously awesome too. But there are so many ways you can show that success or, potential failure of a partnership. But like I said, if someone doesn't hit a CPM target but received all those comments saying, "Oh, I just went and bought this at Whole Foods," I think that shows a great story of intent for leadership. So there's definitely a lot of ways that you can kind of show the impact of a partnership, even if maybe they didn't hit those internal metrics.
Awesome. Let's go to the next slide, Sigi. Perfect. Let's as you're building out these campaigns, I want to end with a note on the Summer of Spice Tour campaign and what worked
Yep.
there. Maybe you can talk about it. But before that, since you talked about AI a little bit and folks in the chat are quite excited about what you were talking about, what are some of the top ways you're leveraging AI to automate, streamline things? What are some things that you would never go back to doing manually?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I've obviously started using Claude to specifically compile performance. So, my workflow is pulling a CSV of campaign performance from Archive. So that includes views, likes, impressions, and EMV. I'm able to drop that into Claude to analyze. One of our recent campaigns in May, I was actually able to drop that CSV and also upload the criteria for our scorecard. And then it was able to just populate the relevant scores on the quantitative pieces of that reporting. So that was obviously super efficient for me. It saved me a ton of time, took out some of that manual work. I'm still learning. Claude is new to me. I only started using it really probably 2 months ago, and so I think it's an incredible tool. I think it can be very, very useful, and I'm looking forward to learning more about how it can be impactful for our program as well.
Awesome. Super helpful. We do have a few minutes for questions, but before I transition into that, I just want to say thank you all for joining. We have a quick little offer on the archive side for folks that are interested. Like Gillian mentioned, we help Momofuku track all of these programs, and we also have phenomenal AI tools that help people make sense of all of this data. Our newest product that we launched is actually called Deep Research Reports, where we can analyze up to 25,000 posts. We can watch these videos, look at the comments, and tell you exactly what's happening. What's great is that you can use this for campaign wrap reports. You can look at trends for people posting about your brand. But my personal favorite is that you can actually run this on your competitors. So we've got a report here that looks at every single thing Claude, Anthropic, right? We all know them, what they're doing on their creator programs, the patterns that are working, the hooks that are working, creators to watch. We have an offer where the first 10 people that'll book a demo, we can actually go generate one of these reports for a competitor of your choice. All you got to do is click the link that Sigi has dropped in the chat. We can look at the comments as well. We can look at the videos. It's really awesome and very helpful. All right, enough promotion. We'll leave the rest of the time for questions. The first one that we have from Claire is, how do you track conversions?
Yeah, so at Momofuku, we're focused on brand awareness, which has been a really fun change of pace for me. My career to date has focused on revenue and tracking conversion. So, based on my past experience, one of the things that I would do is we were able to use codes. So that was really exciting. I know not every brand is able to offer, like Gillian 20 for 20% off. But in my last role, we provided each of our influencers a unique code that was active for a limited time. And I would actually track those conversions in Shopify directly. I think there's also great tools within affiliate marketing that can provide support with that as well. But most of my experience has been tracking directly in Shopify.
Another question, are you doing 100 paid? What do you think is the limit for a one-person show? Seems like a ton in one quarter.
Oh man. What's actually funny is in past roles I have done much more than that on a monthly basis. So to me it's a breath of fresh air. But it just depends on
How
your
much? What was your record, your max? Little flex
uh
for everybody here.
I think it was probably 150 in a month. It could have been, more. I'm thinking about all the product launches I had in some past roles, and those were crazy. But yeah, I think it depends, right? Everyone that I talk to in this industry, they have a different number of partnerships that they're working on each month. And again, you can be super impactful with less, right? Like I always tell every team that I work on that I prefer quality over quantity. So if I could, I would have, you know, five really, really impactful partnerships as opposed to 50 that are just average, right? So I wouldn't compare numbers. I would focus more on that quality over quantity. I think that's kind of the storyline that is really important. You can be so impactful again with a limited budget and very intentional partnerships.
What is the question from Natalia? What is the formula for some of the best performing content for Momofuku?
Oh, that's a great question. Something that we really look for is a really eye-catching shot of our noodles, for example. That has, kind of proven really successful for us. It's been really fun to test. As I mentioned, this is, one of my first roles in CPG. And so, my last role was in fashion and accessories. And it's been really fun for me to understand, how do people react to food content? And so if we get a really good noodle pull like clip in a video, that seems to be exciting, right? Like if you think about what recipes do you maybe save on your own Instagram? I save things that look very appetizing, which I think makes perfect sense. But maybe something that's colorful or has like a really yummy looking broth. We just try to kind of replicate that as well. So noodle pull is really great. High quality content is something that we're also prioritizing, as I mentioned. And we want to make sure that we have a great product shot, right? So whether they're holding like our bag or our chili crunch jar, we want to make sure that it's not overly branded, but it feels kind of integrated into the partnership.
And is that a big part of finding UGC from all of the people that are posting about Momofuku? Do you typically look out for UGC that has those types of content features?
Yeah,
Or this is
yeah.
more for net new content that you're creating?
I think it's a combination of both. So, we've had the opportunity here to find content that already exists, that we've already been tagged in, that does have a lot of those things that we're already looking for. But
Yeah.
from a briefing perspective, I'm also making sure that that's included when I'm briefing in new partners.
Gillian, we recently launched a new feature called AI filters, formerly known as magic fields for those that have tried it. We can have AI watch the video and classify it. And so we have some companies looking for price tags in there, for coupons in there. We'd love to try it to have it watch your UGC and look out for these tasty noodles. AI models have pretty good taste in content, so maybe that'll help. We'll follow up
Yeah,
there.
I would love that.
We'll set it up. It's super easy. Let's talk about UGC.
Mhm.
We've got creators and we've got, let's say, influencers, creators, whatever we want to name them, that they've got some followings and also create content. But then you've got all these people now on Instagram or not on Instagram that are these content creators. They don't have followers. They sometimes have these college kids that'll just create a ton of content. Have you worked with them? Do you like them? For what? Tell us your take on UGC creators.
Yeah, I think UGC is very, very impactful, especially for ads, right? Like you could find a creator who maybe doesn't have a big following, but they have really high quality content and they seem to hit briefs for other content that you've seen them create. So I think that it's really, really beneficial. And then second to that too, besides ads, we also use a lot of UGC for organic social too. So we did this really fun series around sourdough, like chili crunch inclusion in sourdough. We found creators that, are just focusing on UGC, and they were able to make us a series of 4 videos using different different of our chili crunch, and it was so fun. It was so different, and that's obviously I view that as separate from my pay to play partnerships, but it's still meaningful to the program, right? It's kind of part of like the full funnel.
All right, I've got some bad news. Gillian has to go back to running her incredible creator programs at Momofuku, and time is up. Big thank you. This was really helpful. We've never seen such an engaged chat, so many questions. I wish we had time to answer all of them. Unfortunately, we don't. For the people in the chat, if they want to get in touch with you, if they want to reach out, is there a way that they can do so?
Yeah, feel free to add me on LinkedIn. My name, obviously, there's Gillian Boss Smith. So you can find me on LinkedIn. And then my email is just gsmith@momofuku.com. But would love to chat. This has been so great. Thank you, Paul and Siggy. I really appreciate the time. And thank you, everyone, for questions and for joining and listening in.
Awesome. We'll have more of these. Stay tuned. Remember, head over to the form that Sigi posted in the chat if you'd like us to work on a report for one of your competitors. We could also do your brand as well. And big thank you to everyone for tuning in. Have a great one. Bye bye.
Thanks.